Back in 2020, I was working full-time as an engineer, searching for a way to create financial freedom. That was when I discovered e-commerce and Google Ads. With just $20 a day, money that I'd saved from my 9 to 5, I launched my first Google Ads campaigns for my high-ticket dropshipping store. It wasn't easy, and at that time it felt like a huge financial risk to me. But within 6 months, I was able to scale my campaigns to $30,000 in monthly recurring revenue. Google Ads changed everything for me, and it can do the same for you. In this video, I'm going to show you how to start and succeed with Google Ads for your e-commerce business, even if you're starting with a small budget. Whether you're spending $20 a day or $100 a day, I'm going to break down the exact strategies that I used to go from a small daily budget to consistent, scalable results. So when it comes to your daily budget, how low can you go? Well, the truth is, there's no right or wrong answer to this question. What's most important is that you select a budget that you're comfortable with and can afford. When I first launched my high-ticket dropshipping store back in 2020, I started with a daily budget of $20 a day, which equates to $900 a month. And at the time, that was a lot of money to me. That's money that I'd saved up from my 9 to 5. But within just 6 months, I was able to keep increasing that budget, ultimately allowing me to generate $30,000 in monthly recurring revenue. So pick a budget that you're comfortable spending for the next 30 to 90 days. The reason I recommend 30 to 90 is because it may take a little bit of time to start generating consistent conversions and revenue. And as you start to generate consistency, then you can start to optimize your campaigns, which is ultimately going to allow them to perform better. Keep in mind that if you are new to Google Ads, you will make mistakes at the beginning, and this is completely normal. I've coached hundreds of e-commerce business owners, and everyone makes mistakes at the beginning. Now, as you can imagine, if you're spending quite a lot at the start and you're not that experienced in what you're doing, then these small mistakes are going to become very costly, expensive mistakes quite quickly, because that daily budget is going to compound. So my advice would be, don't break your bank. All right, start with a budget that you're comfortable with for the next 30 to 90 days, and keep in mind that it's going to take a little bit of time to optimize the campaigns and start working towards profitability. It'd be unrealistic if I was to tell you that from the absolute get-go, you'll be profitable, especially in a brand new account. So just keep that in mind if you're new to Google Ads. My advice is always to start small and then scale your budget up. But there is one thing that you should keep in mind, and that is that the less you spend, the longer it will take you to acquire data and ultimately optimize your campaigns. If it's a brand new account with no existing advertising data, at the start you're very much paying to acquire data, and then with that data you can then begin to make optimizations. So let's run through a scenario. Let's say you've got two people. Person A starts with a daily budget of $20 a day. Person B starts with a daily budget of $100 a day. Well, person B, who's spending $100, is ultimately going to acquire data at a rate 5 times as fast as the person who's spending $20 a day, simply because he's spending 5 times as much. The quicker you get that data in, the quicker you can begin optimizing your campaigns. So in some senses, it can be a little bit of a catch-22. Don't spend too much if you're a beginner, because it's likely that you will make mistakes, but you want to spend enough that you can actually start generating some data and then begin optimizing the campaigns. My preferred starting budget is $100 a day. Now, if you feel like that's too much for you or too expensive, reduce it and just start with something that you're comfortable with. You can always increase the budget as you start to generate some results. So now that we've got budgeting down, let's talk about billing. And it's important that you understand and take into consideration the way in which you're billed on Google. Google charges you per click, which is why it's also known as pay per click advertising. Okay, so every click that your ads generate, you're going to pay Google for. The other thing to keep in mind is that Google is an auction, which means you're competing against other businesses on the networks. So if you have a small budget, it means that every click counts. And we want to make sure that we're targeting shoppers that have high purchase intent. And I'll break down exactly what that looks like on the next slide. So what do I mean by high purchase intent? Well, let's take into consideration the sales funnel. Ultimately, there are 3 stages to the funnel. You've got the top of the funnel, also known as the awareness stage, the middle of the funnel, also known as the consideration phase, and the bottom of the funnel, also known as the conversion phase. The higher up the funnel someone is, the colder they are and the less likely they are to convert. The lower down the funnel someone is, the warmer they are and the more likely they're going to convert. So if you've got a small budget, really we want to be targeting those that have the greatest purchase intent and those that are most likely to convert. Now, one of the easiest ways to target bottom of funnel high intent traffic is by leveraging Google's search network. The reason the search network is so effective is because you can target specific keywords. But the question is, how do you know what keywords to target? Well, it's quite simple. You use a tool called Google Keyword Planner. That will allow you to identify high purchase intent keywords, determine search demand, level of competition, and also tell you what you can expect to pay as an average cost per click. Now, whilst you can target specific high intent keywords, there is one thing that you should keep in mind, and that is that typically the search network is the most expensive Google network, which isn't ideal if you've got a small budget, especially if you're spending something like $20 a day. It's likely that if you're targeting high intent keywords and your budget's that low, you're going to eat through your daily budget very quickly, and it's going to take you a very long time to actually acquire any data and generate conversions. For that reason, I would recommend that you actually start on the shopping network, and the search network is something that you can explore once you start increasing your daily budget. So why do I recommend that you start with the shopping network? Well, first of all, it actually attracts high intent purchasers by nature in the way in which the network works. Plus, your cost per click is going to be cheaper than what you'd pay on the search network. So it's a great way to acquire data. As the name would suggest, the shopping network is where people go when they're shopping. Okay, so let's look at an example together. Let's assume that someone searches Google for iPhone 15. They're then presented with ads from many different advertisers which show the product title, an image, and a price point. So before anyone clicks on an ad, they're already presented with all of this information, which means as an advertiser, you're not yet charged anything. Remember, you only pay when someone actually clicks on the ad. So the fact that people can see all of this information before they even click on an ad, if they do decide to click on an ad, then they're further self-qualifying themselves, and therefore they have higher purchase intent. Now, as with all of Google's networks, the shopping network isn't without its own faults. With shopping ads, you cannot target specific keywords like you can on the search network. Instead, Google will use the product information that you provide in your product feed, so your product titles, images, descriptions, any product attributes, to pair your product with relevant search terms. So like the iPhone example that we saw, when someone searches for iPhone 15, Google then uses product information within your feed to identify whether or not you have a product that is relevant to that search term, and it will then show your product to the person that is searching for that search term. Now, whilst you can't target specific keywords, you can use negative keyword lists, which means you can tell Google the search terms that you do not want to show for. So if when reviewing your search term data, you identify there are maybe some broad search terms or things that are low converting or poor performing, you can tell Google that you no longer want to show ads for those search terms. You can also leverage automated bidding strategies such as a target return on ad spend, which means you'd give Google a guidance on the return that you'd like the campaign to achieve, and it will automatically adjust your bids at the auction, which means it will analyze the data inside of your ad account, including your search term data, and determine which search terms it's best to bid on in order to achieve your target return on ad spend. So there are a few ways around it. It's just something that you should keep in mind. On the search network, you can target specific keywords, whereas on the shopping network, you cannot. Now, because you can't target specific keywords, it's extremely important that you have a well-optimized product feed, because your product feed is responsible for the search terms that your ads show for. So what do I mean by a well-optimized product feed? Well, your product feed is essentially all of the information housed within Google Merchant Center that Google uses to advertise your products on the shopping feed. So this includes things like your product titles, descriptions, images, categories, attributes, and GTINs, all of which can be submitted to your Google Merchant Center account. Now, if you're unsure how to optimize your product feed, I actually have a video on it inside of my free Google Ads community. It's completely free to join. Just simply click the link in the video description. But one thing I do want to address in this video is your product title, okay? Product title optimization is probably the most important thing that you can optimize within your product feed. The reason for this is because your product title is responsible for 80% of the search terms that you show for on the Google Shopping Network, which means taking the time to optimize your product titles and include keywords will ensure that your ads show for relevant search terms on the shopping network. Remember, with Google Shopping campaigns, you cannot target specific search terms. Google will show your products to searches that it believes are relevant, so you need to guide Google with an optimized product title. Now, I want to run you through two different examples here. So let's look at this product title, for example, Tommy Summer Loafers. Now, this is very common of fashion dropshippers to use this style of format on their website. But actually, to someone searching on Google, it doesn't mean very much. Yes, they've got the keyword loafer in there, but summer loafers doesn't really mean much, and nor does the word Tommy. So instead, what we want to do is optimize the product title to include relevant attributes. So for example, we could start by adding the material, the color, obviously include the product type, and then mention of any size and whether or not it's for men or women. This is just one example of how you might optimize a product title. The optimized product title may look like this: suede blue loafers with white leather sole, size 10, UK men's. What you're trying to do here is leverage relevant keywords into your product title to make sure Google has as much information as it needs, one, to show your product to the relevant search term, but also to let the customer know in the shopping ad exactly what it is that they're looking at. Remember, if I'm searching for suede blue loafers with a white sole in size 10, and a product title just says Tommy Summer loafers, I'm probably going to be less inclined to click on that, as opposed to if I saw an ad that was extremely relevant to the search term that I'd just put into Google. Now, this is just one example, okay? There are many different ways in which you can optimize product titles. I wouldn't say there's necessarily a right or a wrong way. It's just whatever works well within your particular niche. So have a look to see what your competitors are doing on the shopping network. By all means, don't take theirs as a perfect example, because a lot of the time people do this wrong. But have a look at who you're competing against, look at how they format their product titles, and make sure you do yours better. When running Google Ads on a small budget, consolidation is extremely important, and I'm going to run you through how to consolidate your campaigns to maximize your return on investment on the next few slides. So now we've taken into consideration budgeting, billing, the sales funnel, as well as pros and cons of different campaign types. It's time to decide which campaign type to actually build. And my recommendation for a small Google Ads budget would be a Performance Max campaign. Now, there are two different types of Performance Max campaigns. There's a feed-only campaign and a full-stack campaign. So feed-only only leverages the shopping and the Google display networks, whereas the full-stack leverages all of Google's available networks. I'm going to run through some different scenarios as to why you might opt for one over the other. And to be honest, it mostly comes down to two things: your budget, and also the number of products that you intend on advertising. If you have a daily budget of $20 to $50 a day, regardless of how many products you intend on advertising, I would recommend setting up a feed-only PMax campaign. Now, if you have a budget between $50 and $100, the structure I recommend is going to be entirely dependent on the volume of products that you have. So if you have above 50 products, I'd recommend a feed-only campaign. But if you have less than 50, then you could build out a full-stack PMax campaign. If you can imagine, if we have over 50 products and we're advertising on all of Google's available 5 networks, then that $50 to $100 budget is going to get spread thin quite quickly. And it's then going to take a lot of time for Google to be able to test all of these different products on the different available networks to get conversion data back and begin optimizing. So like I said, the key here is really to consolidate as much as possible. Now, if you've already begun generating sales prior to setting up Google, maybe you've got some organically or you've been testing on other paid advertising channels, then you could look to leverage that data. And rather than advertise all of your available products, you could consider setting up what's called a hero campaign, which is essentially just all of your best-selling products. However, if you don't have any existing advertising data, this is fine. I'd recommend casting a wider net and see what comes back. Now, regardless of what campaign structure you choose, there's one thing that's extremely important, and that is that you have accurate conversion tracking and attribution set up, which means making sure that you're passing back as much conversion data as possible into your Google advertising account. So this is add to carts, initiate checkouts, and most importantly, purchase conversions. Google needs this data in order to be able to optimize your campaigns. Without this, Google simply doesn't know whether something's working or not. So it's extremely important that you have this set up correctly. If you're unsure how to set up your conversion tracking accurately, I do have a video where I break it down inside of my free Google Ads community. It's completely free to join. Just click the link in the video description. Next up is location targeting. Now, regardless of your budget, whether it be big or small, I always recommend targeting just one country with each PMax campaign. And the reason for this simply is because you often find that performance metrics will vary depending on location. Therefore, I like to segment PMax campaigns by country, which enables location-specific optimization. So my advice would be to focus on one country per campaign for better targeting and budgeting efficiency. And that's really what we're focusing on at the moment: consolidation and budget efficiency, where you only have a small budget. So when launching your campaign, I'd only recommend targeting one location. Next up is selecting the right bidding strategy. Now, for Performance Max campaigns, there's two different types: maximize conversions or maximize conversion value. Max conversions is better suited to lead gen as opposed to e-commerce. Let's say, for example, you had a fixed cost that you wanted to pay per lead. You could set that as a target cost per acquisition. With e-com, it doesn't really make sense to use max conversions because more often than not, people are advertising many different products. You also have upsells and cross-sells. So it's not often that you have a fixed cost that you want to pay per conversion. Yes, you might have an average order value, but typically your conversion value will vary depending on the order, based on the product purchased or any potential upsells and cross-sells. Not only that, but your products are also likely to have different profit margins and therefore profit potential. So it's always best to calculate your break-even ROAS and then use a maximize conversion value bidding strategy and set a target return on ad spend. So now you're probably wondering, what do I set my target return on ad spend to? Well, it's going to be dependent on two things. One, your profit margins, and two, whether or not you have any existing advertising data in your Google ad account. If you do have existing data in the ad account, then simply review your previous performance and set a target return in line with what you've achieved in the past. So by this point, you should now be in a position to launch your first Performance Max campaign, which is phase 1 complete. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, you're probably going to want to leave this campaign for 4 to 6 weeks without making any major adjustments. Google actually recommends 6 weeks without touching the campaign whatsoever. The reason I recommend 4 to 6 weeks is really just to give it time to acquire data. It's very unlikely that you're going to be able to make any optimizations, let alone Google, without 4 to 6 weeks worth of data. Once you have data, it becomes very easy to make decisions because you can clearly see what's working versus what isn't, and therefore you know what to double down on and what to improve. Once you do have 4 to 6 weeks worth of data, you've essentially completed phase 2 and you can move on to phase 3, which is where you can begin to optimize your campaigns. With Performance Max, you do have the benefit of them being somewhat self-optimizing, at least at the auction. But there are things that you need to optimize yourself, which comes back to your product feed, as we discussed earlier, and also your asset groups. Now, one thing to keep in mind, as with most things in life, is that success isn't always immediate. It will take time to acquire data, but ultimately the more data that you acquire, the more you can begin to optimize your campaigns. And the more you optimize your campaigns, the closer you can get them to consistency and profitability. Please don't be that guy that sets up a PMax campaign, doesn't see immediate success, and then says Google ads don't work. If there is demand for your products and you're competitive in the market, and I don't just mean on Google ads, I mean in the actual market that you're competing in, then you will generate conversions. It's just a matter of time. But don't test one strategy and simply give up because it didn't work first time round. You must test and experiment. Ultimately, that is what marketing is about. Test, iterate, repeat. The way I like to describe Google Ads is as a magnifying glass for your business. It's the tool that you're using to send traffic to your site. But past that point, there are many different variables that are ultimately going to dictate the conversion rate of that traffic. Now, if you're sending traffic to your website and it's not converting, that doesn't necessarily mean that Google Ads don't work, which is why I said earlier, if there is demand for your products and you're competitive in the marketplace in general, then you will generate conversions. But sometimes people need to zoom out a little bit and focus less on Google Ads and more on their business as a whole. Now, the only caveat to that is you do need to make sure that you're sending high intent traffic to your website. If you're sending high intent traffic from Google and your product is competitive within the marketplace, then you should generate conversions. Now, if after watching this video you still have questions or concerns, or perhaps you simply just want to accelerate your path to success, then hang around for the next 2 minutes because I can help you. The same way I helped Alex go from $0 to $47,609 with Google Ads in just 90 days, bearing in mind he had no prior Google Ads experience. Nor did Sasha, who I helped go from $0 to $105,209 with Google Ads in 90 days. Or the same way I helped Jacob make £1,134 within 1 week of setting his Google Ads live. And here's what many other members have to say about working with me. Now, all of these successful business owners have one thing in common. Do you know what that is? They all took a shortcut. And yes, they do exist. They're called mentors. You don't have to navigate Google Ads alone. My mentorship program is designed to fast track your path to success over a 3-month period. At the end of those 3 months, inside of my VIP Google Ads Accelerator, you'll have a Google ecosystem that works for you, generating you consistent profitable sales for your e-commerce business. This isn't just about ads, it's about building a system that works for you, allowing you to eliminate the guesswork and accelerate your path to success. Now that you've seen how to leverage Google Ads, even with a small budget, and tap into an audience of high intent shoppers that are ready to buy, the next step is entirely up to you. If you're ready to make a change, then click the link in the video description and apply for my one-to-one mentorship program. Lastly, I just want to take a moment to thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you found it useful. If you did, let me know by adding a like, subscribe and a comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.